and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. My name is Diana Skaya. Leaders from over 30 countries gathered in Paris for high-stakes talks as part of a coalition of the willing aimed at reaffirming support for Ukraine amid the possibility of a U.S.-brokered ceasefire or a peace deal, if that's what we can call it. But now, a key focus of the discussions was the potential deployment of Reassurance forces to oversee the implementation of any future agreement. Meanwhile, President Zelenskyy urged the United States to stand firm against Russian demands. And joining me now to unpack this all and the details of the Paris summit is Andrew Tettenborn, law professor at Swansea University. Professor, good morning, and thank you so much for being with us here this morning.
Good morning, my pleasure.
Professor, before we begin, I'd like to invite you to listen to a soundbite here by President Zelenskyy.
I'm not disappointed. I received the things that are very important to me. There's support of the numbers of our armed forces, and it's very precious. It's our army. It'll be supported now and after the war, and it's important. These conditions are constantly changing. I thought that we had agreed that there will be a framework deal and then the full deal. Now, as I understand, the Ukrainian and American teams are working on it because the U.S. is changing these conditions and is offering to sign the full deal right away.
Professor, of course, all of this with what Zelenskyy said, do you share President Zelenskyy's perception of this summit? What do you make out of it?
I'm not entirely sure I share it. The point is, he had to say what he said. He's in very delicate negotiations with the United States. And if you're in delicate negotiations, for example, to keep supplies of arms going, to keep supplies of intelligence coming in, you don't say that you are going to get that you're particularly worried or that you're rather unhappy with what the United States is doing. I think here he's obviously aware of the play of power between the coalition of the willing and the United States. And he's doing his best to preserve Ukraine's interests here. Because if you look at the meeting of the coalition of the willing, which is what, 29, 30 countries, we do have a fairly big division now, at least nominally, between the United States and just about every other Western country. The Western attitude, other than the United States, is we don't trust Putin. We need to continue fighting him in Ukraine. And I think there's a feeling at the end that if we give in on Ukraine, then Putin may come back for more. It seems to me that the United States view and the Trump view isn't so much support for Putin. The Trump view is that he needs to concentrate on what he sees as the real enemy, which is China, and that he regards Ukraine as a distraction from that and wishes to have Russia either neutral or weakly in support of the United States on the basis that Russia also probably distrusts China. But I think that's the difference between the two. My own view is, and I'm normally very pro-American, my own view is that here the coalition of the willing is right. That if we do appear weak, if we do give too many concessions to Putin, it may be Ukraine today, it may be some other country tomorrow.
And of course, Poland would know that more than any other country. Professor, let me ask you this. Can you elaborate on the proposed Reassurance forces and how are European leaders responding to that? What are they going to make out of that?
Well, I must admit, I think it's a fairly long prospect as to whether we're going to get Reassurance forces. The only countries which have shown particular enthusiasm have been the UK and France, which could probably produce a few thousand, though both countries, I think, have militaries that are fairly reduced. If you look at the reaction from other European countries, including Donald Tusk in Poland, Friedrich Merz in Germany, and also Italy, you've got distinct unwillingness to put troops on the ground. And I think you have to realize that troops on the ground in Ukraine, even in the form of peacekeeping troops, is a very big risk. Because the one thing we want to avoid is direct conflict between troops from a Western country and Putin's troops. Now, that is something that I think Donald Tusk is very aware of, and I think that explains his unwillingness to put Polish troops on the ground. And I have a feeling that Britain and France, although they say they are willing to provide a reassurance force, I think they would very much rather not if they can possibly help it, and certainly would rather not without the full-scale support of the United States.
Professor, you did mention, of course, right now, Premier Tusk. We know that Tusk met with Macron. The two are in the stages of agreeing on a treaty about dual security guarantees. What details can you tell us about that?
Well, I haven't heard very much about it. I suspect that they will have very much preferred to have talks on supplies of arms, backroom support for Ukraine. I have not heard that Donald Tusk has decided that he is now willing to put troops on the ground in Ukraine. I suspect it's very much still a matter of background support rather than reassurance troops. I think it's very much a minority in the coalition of the willing that at present is prepared to send troops to Ukraine.
Professor, but just to lead back on what you said, I mean, how will the establishment of these quote-unquote reassurance forces actually be able to, or maybe change course or influence the dynamics of the conflict and the implementation of any potential ceasefire agreements? I mean, is it something that, Russia would maybe see no harm in and kind of agree to be able to finally find a resolution to this conflict?
Well, it's a big risk, shall we say. It might do as you say, because Russia is just as aware as we are of the risks of a confrontation between Russian troops and troops of any NATO country. Now, if there were a fairly clear agreement brokered by the United States, and after that agreement, troops from Britain, France, and maybe one or two other countries were to go to Ukraine, this might make Russia think twice before further aggression or further attempts to soften up Ukraine. But as I say, it's very much of a big risk. That's actually why my view is that we're very much waiting on a clear agreement between the US and Russia on this matter. And I think also we're probably trying to put backroom pressure on Donald Trump in this respect. I think we want to say to him, look, you want the glory of having brokered a peace settlement in Ukraine as honest broker, but you have to be fairly careful. We are, for the moment, going to continue to arm Ukraine only when we have a clear guarantee of a lasting agreement are we likely to agree to send troops. I suspect that may be our thinking.
Thank you so much, Professor Andrew Tettenborn, law professor at the University of Swansea University, for being with us here on World Talks.
My pleasure.
And that's all for this edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching and stay tuned with us for more news and features.